Okay, welcome to video 5.3. We're going to continue talking about solving systems of equations algebraically, only this time we're going to learn a new method, which is called substitution. So we have steps just like we did in the previous. We're going to rearrange one equation so that it is in y equals or x equals. It doesn't matter which one. I know you're used to putting equations in y equals, but it can be x equals. And when we look at like the first example, we have a's and b's, so we can just use those as well and get one variable by itself. So really it's just one equation with the variable by itself. And then we substitute what the y or x or whatever variable we use equals into the other equation. Solve your new equation, and then use that answer and substitute it into one of the original equations, and then check both equations. Okay, so let's try one example together. So our first step was to rearrange that one variable was by itself. Well, if we look here, I already have my first one as a equals. So this is what a equals. So I don't have to do any work there. It's already done. So if this is what a equals, I can take it and plug it in place of my a and then solve from there. So I'm going to rewrite this as b minus 5 equals negative 2b plus 7. So I just took what a equals and I substituted it in place of a. So now we can solve just like we normally do. So rover, bring the smaller x over. So I'm going to add 2b to both sides. And when I do that, I get 3b minus 5 equals 7. So now I need to get my numbers on the other side. So I'm going to add 5 to both sides. And when I do that, I get 3b equals 12. Not quite done yet. We need to solve for b. So now I'm going to divide both sides by the 3. And then we finally get that b equals 4. So that was my step 1 is done. I rearranged, I substituted what it was into the other equation and solved a new equation. So I have 1 through 3. Now I'm not done yet. I need to use the answer to substitute into one of the original equations. It doesn't matter which one you use. Either one is fine. I'm just going to use the top one because it seems like it's a little bit easier since b is by itself. But it really doesn't matter either way. So I started by writing my equation, a equals b minus 5. I already know what b is because I just solved for it. So now I'm going to put that in place of b up here. So I substituted my answer, 4 minus 5, and 4 minus 5 is negative 1, so my a value is negative 1. So this time, since they weren't really points, I'm not going to write them as x comma y. I could write a comma b since that's alphabetical like x comma y is, but I'm just going to say that these are my two answers. A is negative 1 and b is 4. So I substituted, I found the two answers that I have for this system of equations, and now I'm going to need to check in both equations. So remember that you have to check in both, because if this was two equations of two lines, x's with y's, then we would take these and we put them in y equals, and we would see if this was truly the two values of where the lines intersect. So if it's in one equation, if it checks in one, that just means it's a point on that line. We have to check to make sure it's a point on both lines. That would tell me that it is where they intersect. So my check over off to the side, and I did this one with variables because when we check, this time we can't really put it in y equals. We have to form the manual check here. We have to substitute it in to a and b to see if it does equal. So now I'm going to put a and b in place of a and b in my equation. So I subbed in negative 1 and 4. I always use parentheses when we sub in, especially when we have negatives. And when I do that, I end up with negative 1 on the left-hand side because there's nothing to change there, equals 4 minus 5, that is negative 1. So remember, we can't just assume that it checks. Make sure that it does. That does check. Now I got to check in the other equation. So first I just wrote out my other equation. I subbed in a and b with parentheses. Then we can put in our calculator. Well, negative 1, that's just going to equal negative 1. And on the right-hand side here, I have negative 2 times 4, which is a negative 8, plus 7, that's going to bring me to negative 1. So again, I have negative 1 equals negative 1. And that one also checks. So now I've done both checks, and they did work. Don't just assume again. Okay, so that's it for using substitution. Now we have 2 algebraic and graphically, so 3 ways to solve systems of equations. Okay, we'll continue this in class. Have a good night.